Brazos County High School.
Today we're going to be talking about all that you need to know to raise a market lamb SAE project.
Thanks, and dig 'em.
So a few reasons why having a market lamb SAE is important is that it teaches students a lot of skills. First of all, students will learn a lot of business skills. Essentially, your market lamb project is going to work just like a business enterprise on a smaller scale. Students will be in charge of all of the financial needs, and they'll also be able to keep all of the money they make by selling their market lamb. Also, it teaches students responsibility. When students are in high school, they can learn new skills on responsibility that will help them as they go into college, in the real world, and so on. It's difficult to keep something alive, so it's great to start with the market lamb.
Always make sure you're wearing closed-toed shoes when you're in the barn. Even though your sheep are kind of small, they can still step on your feet and it can hurt. So always make sure you're wearing closed-toed shoes, also to protect you from feces and urine. Also, a thing to keep in mind is temperature outside. So whenever it's really cold and your sheep barely have any wool because you've clipped them recently, you need to make sure that they have a lot of hay. Hay, whenever ruminant animals digest them, increases the heat that the bacteria levels are creating inside of their rumen, and so therefore it keeps the sheep warm. Also, whenever it's hot outside, make sure that you have your fans on. All of our barns in Brazos County have fans, but you have to turn them on. So we also have misters. Make sure the misters are turned on, and that your sheep are protected from the sun by shading objects and protected from the wind by barriers.
A great way to tell if your lamb is healthy is if it is eating good. Always make sure you feed your lamb at least twice a day of feeding grain, and whenever it is cold, always make sure they have some good hay out to keep them warm.
Copper is toxic to sheep. Make sure you never feed your sheep goat feed. Just because they're similar animals does not mean they eat similarly. Alright, a few lamb health tips. If your lamb looks like this, shaking by itself, just curled up in a corner away from all of its friends, you should probably call your ag teacher. Also, you can tell this lamb isn't eating or drinking. It's a big problem. Please don't leave it till the last minute because your sheep may pass away. Always make sure if you notice your sheep looking unhealthy that you call your ag teacher and then get them away from the rest of your sheep. We don't want all of the rest of the sheep in the barn getting sick. So always move them over to a place by themselves where they have enough hay and food and water to stay healthy. Always make sure that your lambs have a nice water supply. That's key to health. Also, make sure the fence stays high. Sheep are jumping animals. They can hop over small fences, and we don't want them getting mixed in with other people's sheep that could be sick. So make sure your fence height is at a nice level, probably right under your shoulder. Always make sure to latch your gate when you leave. Lambs can be out lickety-split before you even notice. Always be aware of a sheep's flight zone. They can jump really high and kick you in the face and in the chest, and it can injure you pretty bad. Also be aware when you're clipping their hooves that you have the hoof in an angle so that they can't kick you right in the face. So always be watching your flight zone and wherever the sheep's hooves are so they can't kick you. Lambs are social animals. Make sure they always have a friend near them. They like to bunch up in groups and never like to be alone. If your lamb is alone for too long, it could get sick out of loneliness.
Now, whenever you grab a lamb, make sure you grab it by its neck. You never want to grab it by its leg. What you really want to do is not make any sudden movements, remain calm, and try to get your lamb into a corner. Once it is in a corner, try to grab it by its neck.
Now, a very important part about raising your lamb is making sure that your lamb is comfortable with you. Obviously, this lamb does not like me setting it up because it's just not used to me. It's the first time I've encountered this lamb. So spending at least 1 hour a day with your animal is essential to making sure that once showtime comes around, your lamb will be nice and comfortable with you and set up and not get misaligned because it's scared. Also, always make sure that your lamb is nice and clean. Now, if you zoom in on the wool right here, you can see how it is a nice, almost beige color. You can see a few dirt spots, but there's not too many. You just want to make sure that there's no mud, especially on the belly and on the legs. Otherwise, you might get some ringworm, fungus, other issues happening. Plus, it's good just to keep your lamb clean. A clean lamb is a healthy lamb. One way to tell if your lamb is feeling sick is if you look at its nostrils. Now, this is a nice, healthy nostril right here. You don't see any mucus coming out or anything. If you see any boogers, mucus coming out of your lamb's nose, it's unhealthy and you should check up on it. Alright, so whenever you're holding your lamb and trying to handle it without a head halter on it, always make sure one of your hands is under its chin, holding it just like this, and your other one is at the base of its head, around the base of its ears. This way you can walk it if you need to. Try to walk it. And you can also make sure that you have it under control whenever no halter is available.
Now let's talk about setting up your sheep for the show. You should be practicing this at least once a week with your sheep. That way they're used to it whenever they get to the show. So Mr. Diaz is going to demonstrate how to properly set up your lamb. First, he's going to position the front legs to where they're perfectly straight and in a nice comfortable angle for the sheep. Next, he's going to position the back legs to be pointed at a 45-degree angle outwards. And then he's going to have the lamb press against his knee eventually. Cut that part out.
Doing it.
Cool. And as you can see, it's partially set up correctly. You also should be practicing walking your lamb. If you don't have a halter yet, you can practice walking it like Mr. Diaz is in this video. He's holding the neck securely and positioning his arm around the front of its chest, that way the lamb doesn't run away.
An important part of keeping lambs is always making sure that your lamb's hooves are nice and trimmed. Now if you look at this hoof right here, this lamb just came back from a show, so its hooves are nice and straight. You can see there's a pad right here. It is a soft pad, and around the edges there's a hard hoof that is growing. And you want the pad and the hoof to be parallel, nice and straight and square with each other whenever you are trimming hooves. This one might need, I'd say about half a centimeter of hoof clipped off right there. Now whenever you're clipping hooves, it is very important that you do not cut too deep. If you do that, your lamb's hoof might start bleeding, and that can cause an infection. Another very important part of why you want to keep hoofs trimmed is to make sure that no hoof rot develops. Now when lambs are treading in some very muddy or wet environments, their hooves can develop something called hoof rot, which can be a lifelong condition that might disable your animal. So there's two different kinds of lambs that you can have. Here we see some hair sheep, which don't grow wool, they just grow hair that will shed. And over here, these are wool sheep. Now you can see that these wool sheep are nice and clipped. That's just to make sure that their hair does not overgrow because they do not shed their fur. Now when you're looking at a typical market lamb, it is best to have a wool sheep because it has a more consistent carcass quality. If you're using a school facility to keep your lamb, you'll see a sign posted with 5 of these requirements before you leave and while you're at the barn. The first one is no copper. Make sure your sheep is not eating any goat feed because there is copper in goat feed. Second, always watch your flight zone. Sheep can get really spooked depending on where you're at in relation to them. Third, make sure your pen is clean. It is a requirement that you clean your pen daily so that your lamb stays healthy and so does the environment around your lamb. Fourth, make sure your lamb is clean. A lamb that is dirty and wet can grow a lot of different diseases like ringworm and fungus on their wool. Fifth, wash your hands. Diseases can spread from your sheep to other humans, so make sure your hands are always clean when you're done handling livestock.
Alright, there are a few expectations that we as ag teachers expect from you as students showing an SAE project. The first one is submit your livestock SAE plan prior to starting your project for advisor approval. Second, follow all the safety guidelines at all times. So the top 5 that we mentioned earlier in the video, those will always need to be followed. Third, report your ag teacher any changes in your lamb's health. Like earlier when we saw that sick lamb, make sure you're always keeping your ag teacher up to date. We care about you and the health safety of your project. Feed your lambs twice daily. The first meal needs to be before 9 a.m. and the second meal needs to be after 5 p.m. So before school and then right after school. Then you need to rake and clean your pens at least daily. We will be checking to make sure your pen is kept clean, especially for your lamb's safety and health. You also need to provide for all of the expenses for your project. So the ag teachers are not responsible for buying feed and hay for your animal. That is on you. Spend at least 1 hour daily working with your project. The lambs will be super skittish if you're not handling them every day. Cleaning your lamb will also get them used to you touching them and handling them and catching them. You need to own your lamb at least 3 months before the show date. So in your list of important dates to know, July 20th is the last day for you to purchase your lamb. Then if your lamb is kept at the school facilities, you have to purchase livestock liability insurance in case something happens to your lamb in the barn or if something happens to the barn. Alright, let's talk budget. So first, we're going to talk about the cost of a lamb. Depending on your breeder, which we'll suggest a few, they're normally around $250. And then as for feed and grain, the total cost is going to be probably around $100. Then you're going to want to get livestock insurance, which we suggested and require as Brazos County High School. That is going to cost around $35 plus, that's for the fair liability insurance, and then the livestock insurance is around $15. And then for show supplies, we added it up, it's probably going to be around $30, depending on where you buy it from and how much of it you do buy. And then, so that comes out to a total of about $430.
Don't forget to wash your hands after handling your sheep.
Turning all the night time.